Welcome to the latest installment of Don't Take This as Gospel. We are in Dennis Prager's book, The Rational Bible, Exodus, God, Slavery, and Freedom. If you'd like to pick up a copy, please go to the affiliate link that I've got in the video description. We are in Exodus chapter 19. This is the run-up to God's revealing the Ten Commandments. And we're going to be dealing with a rather sticky issue. And it's an issue for a lot of... It's an issue that winds up firing up a lot of people in kind of bad ways. It's the issue of chosenness, the chosenness of the people of Israel, the Jews being the chosen people of God. What does that mean, and what all does that entail? Because there's multiple interpretations of that, and not all of them kind of portray things in a favorable light. So, getting into Exodus 19, 5 through 6, we have God saying, "Indeed, all the earth is mine." This is God speaking. "Indeed, all the earth is mine, but you," meaning the Israelites, "shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Now, this is God basically choosing the Jews. Now, the Jews have just been released from bondage in Egypt by God, and God is now telling them exactly what he has released them for, and basically saying, look, if you accept this covenant that I'm about to make with you, then you will be my chosen people. Now, Dennis Prager is very clear, so clear that he actually puts this as a headline in his book, that chosen does not mean superior. It says the Jews are not chosen to be God's treasure because they are inherently superior to other nations. The Hebrew Bible's repeated critical portrayal of the Israelites and of Jews later should make that abundantly clear. Israel is chosen because its job is to spread knowledge of God and his moral law to all of humanity. And also he adds, nor do the Jews become inherently superior because they are chosen. So in Dennis Prager's view, there is no inherent superiority that is paired with the idea of chosenness. God can choose whomever he wants, and it just so happens he chose the Jews. That's his prerogative. That doesn't say anything is special about the Jews. Now, that's one view, because of course Dennis Prager is not the only Bible commentator in existence. There are others. So, let's take a look at some of those others. Now, what's interesting is there is a verse coming up in Exodus 19, and it is something that is highlighted quite a bit. It is considered extremely significant, and yet Dennis Prager touches on it barely at all. And it is this part. It is when, after God has told Moses this, that the Jews are going to be God's chosen people if they accept the covenant, then Moses came and summoned the elders of the people and put before them all that the Lord had commanded them. Or all that the Lord had commanded him. So basically he's saying, this is what God told me to tell you. And all the people answered as one, saying, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses brought back the people's words to the Lord. So basically, God says, if you keep my commandments, and keep in mind now, God has not done any revelation of commandments yet. If you keep my commandments, then you will be a treasured people to me. All the earth is mine, but you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation to me. And the Israelites, without even knowing what burden God is going to lay upon them as far as the commandments go, says, we'll do it. Sign us up. Now, that's actually very significant to some of the Israelite commentators from way back in the day, but what's interesting is that they're not really mentioned too much by name. Let's see. There is a narrative of the sages, and the sages are, the very, very early Jewish commentators who's told a lot of stories and commented on the Old Testament. And they said, that God offered the Torah, offered his law, his commandments, to other nations as well. But they all these other nations refused the law of God because the commandments of the Torah were in conflict with their national characteristics. So one of the things that you find out in Genesis is that besides Israel, there are these 70 nations that are descended from Noah. And these 70 nations are, just basically natural peoples in one way or another. And they spread out throughout the world after the Tower of Babel incident. This is stuff that we'll cover someday when I'm covering Genesis. But according to this commentary, which is, oh, by the way, this is the Art Scroll Stone Edition Chumash, which is referring to the first 5 books of the Bible as well as a few other things. So the Torah is in here, and I'm reading from it. Art Scroll has put together this really nice commentary. It's an English language commentary along with an English language translation of the Bible. It also has Hebrew in here, so people who can read Hebrew, which I am not one, can compare the English and the Hebrew translations, and also they can also look at the Hebrew commentators, which I cannot read at all. So thankfully, there is a lot of English language commentary. And in this English language commentary is that portion that I just told you about the sages and how God offered the Torah. In other words, the deal that God just made with the Israelites, the deal that they've accepted. God made this deal with all the other nations. Israel was the last nation he came to. And all of these other nations, because they had some sort of preference for, thought I heard my phone ringing for a second, because they had some sort of preference for one sin or another, would not accept the law of God. For example, Esau's offspring would not, these are the Edomites, the Edomite nation, they would not tolerate a law that prohibited murder. Ishmael's nation, and I believe this is kind of referring, this is kind of referring to the Arabs, could not live with a law that banned thievery. And, that's, if you look at some of the early history of Islam, it's kind of like, yeah. And Lot, he was the father of the Moabites and the Ammonites, they would not accept a ban on adultery because they were conceived through incest. Now it was Israel's turn. So, God had gone through all these nations, and for one reason or another, these nations had said, nah, we'll keep our sins, thanks. But then God makes this same offer to Israel, and they're going to accept. Now, here is a passage in the commentators. Now, here is the crazy thing. A lot of times I read in these passages and it cites a commentator or another from way back in the day. So you kind of expect sometimes that, harsh or politically incorrect sounding commentary can be attributed to this or that ancient Jewish commentator. There are Jewish commentators like Rashi. There's the what's his name? The Chofetz Chaim. There's Rambam, Maimonides, Nachmanides or Ramban. So there are these older Jewish commentators, and usually when I'm reading things, they basically cite those names. There's no citation on this particular paragraph, so I think this particular paragraph actually comes from a modern Jewish rabbi who's commentating on this passage of the Bible. And here's what he says, and brace yourself. Human beings have natures that are rooted in their innermost spiritual forces. That nations have their own unique characteristics is the message of centuries of history. The Torah can become the national heritage only of a people that is suited to its demands. Nations nurtured in impurity and wickedness, such as the bloodshed, dishonesty, and immorality of Esau, Ishmael, and Lot, respectively, could no more accept the Torah than a midget can touch a vaulted ceiling. Well, now, if that doesn't tell you that the other nations of the world, besides Israel, are spiritually stunted in some way, just as the growth of a midget is stunted such that he can't reach the ceiling, I don't know what does. So already you've got this, kind of superiority complex going on with this particular commentator. And this commentator continues, and you remember I was telling you that Israel accepted the Torah without even hearing what was in it. Didn't even hear the Ten Commandments. So it's just blindly accepting it, saying, yes, we'll take it. That Israel, says the modern Jewish rabbi commentator, was willing to accept the Torah without even inquiring as to its contents was because it had inherited the spiritual heritage of the patriarchs that its cousins had rejected. Yeah, okay, so basically the commentator is saying that there is this spiritual stuntedness, this lack of a spiritual heritage that, according to these early stories by early Jewish commentators, it's not in the Bible itself. It's not in the Bible itself, but it's part of the oral, one could say the oral tradition that is part and parcel of Judaism, because the books of the Bible, those constitute the written tradition of the Jews, but there's all this commentary surrounding it, an interpretive framework surrounding it that makes up the oral tradition of the Jews. And part of this oral tradition appears to be saying that there is some quality that the Jews have that other peoples lack. And keep in mind, though, that this is not a racial thing. This is not any kind of racial supremacy, because anybody can become a Jew. So anybody out of the nations in general can become a Jew and become part of the Jewish nation, and they are considered to be equal Jews. They are not in any way inferior for not having been part of the race of descendants of Abraham. They're grafted in to be full Jews. There's a saying that anybody who becomes a Jew, it is as if he was there with Moses at Sinai. So it's a full equality kind of thing, and it's open to anybody of any race. So this is not a racial supremacy type thing, but considering that in the beginning, when the Jews here accepted the Torah and its commandments, that most of these people were of the tribe of Abraham and descendants of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, it very does strongly have a kind of racial connotation to it. But again, it's all really more of a cultural thing. And, it's not as far-fetched as it might sound to think that a tribe, or like Esau's people, the Edomites, they rejected the Torah, according to the story, on account of its prohibition of murder. Now, you may think, oh, that's just wild. That's just wild. There's no such thing as a people who condone murder. Give me a break, right? But I have actually heard Matt Walsh, and I don't know from what source he got this, but I believe it was Matt Walsh who said that in his studies he learned that, I wonder if it was him or if it was Eric Metaxas, I'm not quite certain, that he learned that when when the Christians were doing missionary work with the Germanic peoples, that murder was so strongly ingrained in their culture that it was a major block to their accepting Christianity. And I read somewhere that the story of Grendel, which is one of the famous kind of Germanic myths, is kind of like a tension between the cycle of murder and revenge that goes on in the Germanic culture, and then the Christianity that liberates uh, the Germanic peoples out of that cycle. So yeah, it's not actually as far fetched as you think to believe that, there are cultures that have certain qualities that are so ingrained that if they were to basically be given this set of rules, they would reject it on account of, yeah, that's culturally incompatible with us, even if it's base things like murder and such. I remember a former Orthodox. Well, I don't know if you can ever really be a former Orthodox priest. He was not over a diocese at the time that I knew him, but he told me one time that he used to be in a diocese in New York where he was overseeing people of a particular ethnic group. And he said, these people, man, they would promise you, oh yeah, we'll do this for you, we'll do that for you, and they would be just lying to your face. And you just had to accept that you couldn't take them at their word. It was just a thing. Their word was no good. And you may think that's like politically incorrect. You may think that's kind of racist, but you know what? There's an example of exactly this in the New Testament. If you look at Titus chapter 1, there is a section in which Paul is speaking to his disciple Titus, who he has put in charge of the church in Crete, and he says, "The reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished. For there are many rebellious people full of meaningless talk and deception. One of Crete's own prophets has said it. Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons. This saying is true." Now, I don't. I really, this is one of these things where it's just kind of like you got to attribute this to culture, of course. So you can't attribute it to race, but wow, that's like a really strong condemnation of the Cretan way of life, and saying, yeah, these people are pretty degenerate, and you're going to have to, pound doctrine into them just nonstop. So yeah, even in the New Testament, there was this sense of various peoples having their own particular traits, and I mean, the like for the Cretans, those are not flattering traits, and for the Jews, there is this sort of flattery in the stories of the sages that basically say, yeah, all of these people, all the rest of the peoples of the world, they were unworthy of the Torah. But the Jews, they had the spiritual heritage of the patriarchs. And there's kind of a sense in which, you kind of want to look at that and say, yeah, spiritual heritage of the patriarch. Do you think maybe that's, centuries of slavery in Egypt? Because I can imagine that if your people have been slaves in Egypt for hundreds of years, you might be used to hearing someone say, hey, this is what you're going to be from now on, and then saying, okay. So as far as, having this superior spiritual heritage goes, I don't know whether that's really, Abrahamic, patriarchal, spiritual elevation, or the spiritual beatdown of having been a race of slaves for hundreds of years. Whether you want to say potato, see the light side or the dark side of that, I don't know. Your mileage may vary. And of course, don't take this as gospel. I'm Mike Partika. I hope you enjoy these commentaries. If you do, please subscribe, and I will catch up with you later. We're still going to have a little bit of material to cover in Exodus chapter 19, and then we will be getting full bore into the Ten Commandments. Ooh boy. That's going to be, there's going to be some deaths to plumb there. All right, y'all take care. and I will talk to you later.